Night settles softly over the quiet continent, spreading its calm across fields, forests, and distant stone homes. Lights dim gently and the world slows into a peaceful rhythm shaped by simple hands and steady footsteps. Before noise, before haste, life moved like a warm breath drifting through an endless quiet dusk. The night opens gradually over the old continent, unfolding with the steady ease of a blanket drawn across a resting body. Darkness gathers in wide, unbroken layers, softening hills, forests, and meadows into gentle silhouettes. A few lamps glow behind wooden shutters, their light muted and warm, drifting across narrow paths and quiet fields. In this hour, Europe feels unhurried, as though the land itself remembers a slower rhythm and chooses to breathe in its own time. Before machines changed the pace of movement and before wires carried sound across great distances, the continent lived in a way shaped almost entirely by touch, by weather, and by the quiet work of hands. Roads were simple lines pressed into the earth. Dawn arrived not with sharp interruptions, but with the natural easing of shadows across stone walls and thatched rooftops. Mornings began with the softened sound of footsteps on soil, with the quiet lifting of wooden latches, and with the patient glow of a fire coaxed awake from last night's embers. In many homes, light came from candles, placed carefully so their flames would not waver in the breeze. Outside, the air moved slowly over fields that had been tended for generations. Trees stood in their familiar rows, their branches tracing shapes that families could recognize even in twilight. The stillness of this world did not demand attention. It simply welcomed whoever passed through with a steady, grounded calm. Life unfolded at a pace guided by nature rather than clocks. People woke when the sky brightened and rested when darkness gathered fully. The day was measured not by minutes, but by the warmth of the sun on stone, the length of a shadow stretching over a barn door, and the soft hum of evening winds settling across the land. Every routine, tending to animals, preparing bread, drawing water, moved with a quiet continuity that made the world feel both ancient and familiar. Tonight, you and I return to that rhythm, not to compare it with today and not to search for lessons, but simply to walk through its gentle patterns. The sound of distant footsteps on a dirt path, the faint creak of a wooden gate closing, the slow rise of smoke from a cottage chimney. Each detail forms a small, steady thread in the larger fabric of this unhurried life. As the night deepens, the continent settles deeper into its natural stillness. Fields darken, lamps soften, and paths fade into the quiet. In this calm, we step gently into a world shaped by simplicity, steady movement, and the quiet breath of centuries resting under the open sky. The soft rhythm of dawn. Dawn does not arrive all at once across the quiet countryside. It stretches itself gently over the old land, allowing every field, forest edge, and distant farmhouse to wake at its own unhurried pace. Long before modern clocks measure the morning with precise numbers, the first light is the only signal anyone needs. It appears gradually, as though the world is exhaling from the night and slipping into a softer hue. Over the low, rolling hills of France, shadows begin to lift. The deep blue of the sky fades into a muted gray, revealing the outlines of trees that have stood through countless seasons. There is no rush in the landscape. Everything waits in a kind of peaceful stillness that belongs to an age before engines and artificial noise. When birds begin their gentle chorus, It is steady and deliberate, a familiar sound, woven into generations of mornings, just like this one. At the edge of a meadow, a farmhouse sits quietly, made of stone that bears the marks of many years. Its walls are thick and cool, its roof darkened by time and weather. Smoke rises in a thin, steady line from the chimney. The fire inside has not been fully extinguished through the night. Embers rest beneath the ash, holding their warmth until someone returns to stir them softly back to life. This continuity brings a comforting sense of presence. Nothing feels new or sudden. Everything seems to follow a rhythm older than memory. Inside the farmhouse, the household begins to stir, not because of any ringing alarms or bright lights, but because the body knows the shift in the air. Morning enters the room the way mist settles over grass, quietly and without demand. Straw mattresses rustle as people rise slowly, their movements guided more by habit than urgency. Feet find the wooden floor, the boards cool and smooth from years of use. The steps creak softly, as though acknowledging each person who walks across them. A woman moves toward the window in the main room. She lifts the wooden bar that holds the shutters closed and pushes them outward. The hinges release a low, familiar sigh. Pale morning air drifts inside, carrying with it the scent of wet grass, dew on soil, and the faint aroma of the meadow. It fills the room gently, as if settling into the space rather than rushing through it. The coolness of the air touches the skin lightly, encouraging wakefulness without insisting on it. Outside, the landscape expands beneath the growing light. The meadow stretches in soft, uneven shapes, still wrapped in the remnants of night. Grass bends under beads of dew. A few early birds move across the field, lifting into the air with calm, steady wings. The world feels softened, as though wrapped in cloth that muffles every sound. Each detail is subdued, blending into the quiet atmosphere that defines the early hours before full daylight. In this time before electricity, dawn is not a sudden transformation. It is a slow unfurling, a steady transition from darkness to light. Lamps are not switched on, fires are coaxed into brighter flames. The warm glow of the hearth grows gradually as wood is added to the embers. The small flames reflect against the stone walls, creating gentle patterns of light that shift with each movement of the fire. This glow becomes the center of the room, giving shape to the morning, while the sky continues to brighten. In the kitchen area, a clay jug of water is poured into a pot and placed above the growing fire. The sound is quiet but grounding. The faint crackle of flame, the soft movement of water, the occasional pop of sap within the wood. There are no metal kettles hissing with steam, no switches, no buttons. Heat comes from the fire and warmth spreads through the room slowly in its own time. The air grows more comfortable with each passing minute. Elsewhere in the house, wooden doors open with low, steady sounds. A child steps into the main room carrying a folded piece of cloth and rubbing sleep from their eyes. Another family member places a log gently onto the fire, adding to the calm effort of beginning the day. Each action is small but meaningful, creating a collective rhythm shaped by routine and quiet cooperation. The animals outside sense the morning too. In the barn, a short distance from the farmhouse, cows shift softly in their stalls, their movements slow and predictable. The air is cooler there, carrying the mixed scent of hay, wood, and the faint warmth of the animals themselves, Chickens rustle from their roosts, moving with a kind of deliberate patience that matches the steady rhythm of the world around them. No one hurries. Even the creatures seem to understand that the day is best entered gently. Across the yard, the sun touches the rooftop of the barn, turning the wooden beams into a shade of warm gold. The grass glimmers faintly. Mist rises in thin trails from the earth, dissolving gradually as the air warms. The light does not rush forward. It spreads slowly, carefully, allowing each shape and surface to emerge from the gray. Life in this place at this time is shaped not by machinery but by familiarity. The morning routine is woven into the memory of the land itself. Tools hang where they have always hung. Paths worn by footsteps extend from the farmhouse to the barn, to the well, to the fields beyond. These paths are narrow and soft from years of use, bordered by small tufts of wildflowers and patches of grass the animals have grazed down. Everything carries the softness of repetition, and this repetition forms the foundation of comfort. Inside once more, the pot of water on the fire begins to warm. The warmth spreads through the room, joining the gentle scent of steam rising in quiet threads. A piece of bread from yesterday's loaf is placed on the wooden table, its texture simple and familiar. The morning meal is small, quiet, and grounding, nothing elaborate, nothing hurried. It is the kind of meal that belongs to a world where time moves in wider, slower arcs. As the sun rises higher, the light grows steadier, filling the house with a calm brightness. Shadows soften along the walls, and the coolness of dawn gives way to a mild warmth. Outside, the colors of the meadow deepen, showing themselves more clearly beneath the settling glow. The air carries the faint hum of insects waking, a sound barely noticeable, but always present. The morning continues its gentle unfolding, embracing every corner of the farmhouse and every stretch of land around it. There is no haste, no sharpness, nothing pulling the day forward faster than it wishes to go. The rhythm remains steady, allowing each movement, each breath, each moment to exist in quiet harmony. And in this softness, the dawn completes itself, unrushed, unbroken, unfurled across the old continent like a calm, familiar song carried through the air. A Europe of small villages. Across the old continent, long before the arrival of modern roads or electric light, life gathers gently in small villages spread from the western edge of Portugal to the quiet forests of Poland. These communities rest within the open landscape like soft footprints left by time, steadily, patiently, without hurry. Most people live here, surrounded by fields, narrow paths, and the steady rhythm of seasons that shape their days. Cities exist, but they are distant places, visited only on occasion. It is the villages that hold the warm, slow heart of daily life. The roads that weave through these places are not paved. They are packed earth, worn smooth by years of footsteps, cart wheels, and the steady movement of animals. Each bend in the path is known intimately by locals who have walked it since childhood. The road may rise gently over a hill or curve around a cluster of trees, but nothing feels abrupt. Instead, every turn carries the softness of familiarity. Some paths have shallow grooves carved by wooden wheels that passed long ago, and these subtle marks guide travelers almost without thought. village often begins with a few modest homes gathered near water or nestled at the edge of workable land. Over generations, more homes appear: timber frames, stone walls, roofs thatched with straw or covered with wooden shingles. They stand close together, forming small clusters of warmth in the wide landscape. Smoke rises from chimneys in quiet streams, especially in the early morning and evening, settling gently over rooftops before fading into the sky. At the center of many villages lies a square, though square is more a suggestion than a shape. It may be circular or irregular, a space created simply by the natural grouping of buildings. It is not loud, nor is it meant to draw attention. Instead, it feels lived in, softened by countless footsteps and touched constantly by small routines. A well often stands in this space, its stones smoothed by years of use. It is the quiet heart of the community. Throughout the day, people come carrying wooden buckets, ropes in hand, moving with steady intention. The sound of the bucket dropping into the water below is gentle and familiar, followed by the slow, deliberate pull of the rope. Voices drift through the air in low tones. Greetings, shared remarks, simple exchanges. Nothing about the conversations is hurried. They flow naturally, as if following the rhythm of the rope itself. Children accompany adults to the well, learning early the weight of necessity. They carry small buckets or help steady the larger ones. This daily chore teaches them the quiet usefulness of their efforts. The movement of lifting, steadying, and carrying becomes a natural part of their growth. They walk beside adults along narrow paths, feeling the earth beneath their feet and sensing the pattern of the day before they fully understand it. The tasks are not heavy. They are simply part of the ongoing flow of life. Homes within these villages are modest but warm. They are filled with the scent of wood smoke and the gentle fragrance of herbs that hang drying from beams. Floors are often packed earth or simple wooden planks. Windows are small and soft, glowing in the evening, illuminated not by bright electric lights, but by candles placed with care to keep the wax from spilling. The flame offers a steady light, golden and calm. It reaches across the room in soft, flickering patterns that make shadows seem almost alive, but never threatening, just another part of the living space. The walls of these homes hold quiet stories. Every beam and stone remembers hands that built them, repaired them, and tended them through winters and summers. Generations live within the same structures, adding small touches but rarely changing the fundamental shape. These buildings age gradually, and their aging becomes another gentle reminder of continuity. Inside, daily tasks unfold without rush. A pot warms slowly over a hearth. Wool is spun by hand in soft, rhythmic turns. Tools hang neatly from wooden pegs, their handles smooth from years of touch. Dust settles lightly on shelves and is brushed away with motions that are neither hurried nor delayed. Life moves at a pace guided entirely by realism and routine. Outside, the village is surrounded by fields, patches of darker soil, grassy meadows, and clusters of low shrubs. Birds circle lazily overhead, moving between trees that line the edges of the land. The countryside feels open yet contained, shaped by the habits of those who live there. Livestock graze calmly, their movement slow and predictable. A dog may wander along a boundary, pausing to listen to distant sounds. Nothing happens suddenly. The quiet of the land carries a sense of ease that flows through each person who steps across it. As the day continues, the village remains steady. A cart rolls gently over the earth, its wheels turning slowly, leaving shallow impressions behind. Someone mends a wooden fence with practiced hands. Others tend to gardens or sweep the area outside their door. These tasks are small, repeated, and touched by a certain softness. The sounds of the village are muted. Footsteps, the creak of wood, the low hum of voices, the occasional call of animals. The air itself feels calm, carrying scents of earth, grass, and smoke. In the afternoon, the light shifts slightly, warming the stone walls and wooden beams. Shadows stretch across the square in long, softened lines. People continue their tasks, but with no sense of urgency. Time does not press. Rather, it unfolds gently, letting each action settle fully before giving way to the next. When evening nears, the village becomes even quieter. The last water is drawn from the well for the night. Tools are brought indoors. Doors close slowly. Windows glow one by one with a warm flicker of candles or small oil lamps. The scent of smoke deepens as hearths are stirred for cooking or warmth. Voices grow softer still, blending with the calm air. Families gather inside their homes, the glow of the fire touching their faces in muted tones. Someone may mend clothing in the corner, their needle moving with consistent, measured strokes. Another person might prepare a simple meal, stirring a pot with a wooden spoon. The room feels full without needing to be loud or lively. It holds warmth not only from the fire, but from the steady presence of those who share the space. Outside, the village settles into its nightly rhythm. Darkness moves gently across the land, covering fields and rooftops in a soft blanket of quiet. The well stands still, its ropes resting, its stones cooling. The paths empty, their marks preserved, until morning footsteps return. Only the faint glow from windows guides the shape of the homes against the night. In this place, life carries the softness of repetition, not dullness, not monotony, simply familiarity. Everything is slower. Everything is touched by hand. Everything unfolds in a calm, continuous flow. These villages hold the quiet pulse of Europe before the rush of modern life. They move at the pace of footsteps, of wooden wheels, of water drawn by hand. And in their stillness, they offer a reminder of how gently a day can unfold when the world moves without haste. Breakfast before machinery. In a small cottage resting at the quiet edge of the Black Forest, the morning begins with a gentle familiarity that is carried through generations. The forest outside is still muted in the early light, its trees holding the last traces of night. The air is cool, drifting softly between the branches and settling over the open yard that separates the cottage from the barn. In this calm space, breakfast does not come from haste or noise, but from the slow unfolding of simple work. On a wooden table inside, the bread dough waits beneath a cloth. It was prepared the night before, mixed by hand in a wooden bowl that has served the household for many years. The bowl holds the dough with the quiet steadiness of something well used and trusted. Overnight, the dough has risen gently, the surface rounded and soft, as though resting deeply until morning came. The farmer, who is both the baker and the caretaker of the home, approaches the dough with familiar movements. He is not a professional baker, nor does he need to be. In this era, making bread is simply part of life, an ordinary skill, learned from watching others, practiced through routine rather than instruction. His hands lift the cloth and reveal the dough underneath. It settles slightly with the touch of cooler air, but remains warm and pliant. He dusts the table lightly with flour, then moves the dough from the bowl, setting it onto the wooden surface. Every movement he makes is slow and grounded. There is no rush. There is no machine waiting to intervene. Only the steady rhythm of his hands, pressing and folding the dough, shaping it into something that will nourish the family within the hour. There is no metal countertop here, no electric mixer humming impatiently, only flour, water, fire, and time. Outside the cottage, the barn is waking with its own quiet stirrings. Cows shift gently in their stalls, their breath rising in soft, visible clouds that dissolve into the cool morning air. Hooves move against straw with slow, muffled sounds. The barn door creaks lightly as it sways in the faint breeze. These sounds blend into the gentle texture of the morning. A rooster calls out, not sharply, but with a steady tone that has become a part of every day. Its call echoes briefly across the yard, marking the arrival of light in a way that feels more habitual than dramatic. This is not a signal of urgency. It is simply the rooster participating in the steady rhythm of the farm, the way it has for countless mornings. Inside the cottage, the fire in the hearth is coaxed awake. Embers left from the night flicker beneath the ashes, responding to the gentle stirring of a wooden poker. New logs are added, resting at the edge of the glowing coals, until they warm and catch fire. The flames rise slowly, creating a soft warmth that begins to spread through the room. The sound of crackling wood blends naturally with the faint hum of the early morning outside. The farmer places a pot of water near the fire. There is no whistle of metal, no quick heating. The water warms gradually, responding only to the slow growth of the flames beneath it. Tea will come soon, steeped in a way that encourages calm rather than speed. The steam rising from the pot will fill the kitchen with a familiar scent, subtle and comforting. On another part of the hearth, a small pot of milk is set to warm. A wooden spoon rests inside it, stirring occasionally with quiet, circular motions. The milk heats gently, never rushed, never left to boil unattended. These small rituals shape the morning, actions repeated day after day, season after season, until they become part of the memory of the home itself. As the dough rests for its final rise, the smell of yeast and flour begins to fill the air. It drifts across the room with a softness that makes the home feel warm even before the fire fully brightens. The scent is unmistakable, familiar, grounding. It carries a sense of continuity, of mornings shared across years, of simple nourishment prepared with quiet intention. The walls of the cottage, built from thick timber and pale stone, hold this warmth gently. They have absorbed countless mornings like this one, countless meals, prepared without noise or hurry. The wooden beams overhead glow faintly in the firelight, their surfaces worn smooth over time. A few dried herbs hang near the hearth, releasing a subtle fragrance whenever the heat rises. Everything in the cottage feels settled, softened by use and memory. Outside, the sun slowly touches the tops of the trees along the forest edge. Light filters through branches in long, steady lines, falling onto the ground in soft patches. The forest remains quiet, as though waking with deliberate care. Birds begin their morning movements, hopping from branch to branch, testing their wings before taking flight. Their calls are gentle and dispersed, blending easily with the calm air. The farmer returns to the dough and shapes it one final time before placing it near the fire to bake. In this era, baking bread is a patient process. The dough sits in a clay or cast iron pot, or sometimes directly on a warmed stone, depending on the household. The heat from the hearth surrounds it gradually, allowing the bread to rise and cook without sudden bursts of heat. The crust forms slowly, the interior softening and expanding with quiet certainty. As the bread bakes, the aroma deepens. It moves through the cottage in warm, comforting waves, filling every corner and settling into the wooden surfaces. The smell becomes a part of the morning, a gentle promise of the meal to come. The farmer sets bowls on the table, places simple utensils beside them, and prepares small portions of butter or jam made from berries gathered the previous season. In the barn, the animals continue their slow morning movements. A cow shifts its weight, nudging another softly. A chicken hops from a low roost and steps into the yard with measured curiosity. These actions carry a peaceful rhythm, aligned with the natural pace of the land. Soon, the bread is ready. The crust is firm but not hard, a warm golden color touched by the fire. The loaf is lifted carefully from its pot or stone and placed on a wooden board. The sound it makes as it settles is quiet but full, a soft crackle that signals warmth within. The loaf steams gently as it is cut, each slice releasing more of the comforting aroma into the air. Tea is poured into simple cups. Milk is ladled into bowls. Slices of bread are placed onto wooden plates. Breakfast is simple, warm, and grounding. There are no machines telling anyone to hurry, no sounds intruding from far away. Only the quiet presence of the home, the warmth of the hearth, and the steady rhythm of the morning unfolding. This kind of breakfast lingers in the memory of an age without noise, not because it was grand or elaborate, but because it was made entirely by hand, entirely with intention, and entirely within the soft, unbroken rhythm of a world moving without haste. Here, in this small cottage by the Black Forest, the morning rises gently. The bread cools on the table, the fire burns with a steady glow, and the day begins in the most unhurried way possible, shaped by simplicity, warmed by routine, and softened by the quiet breath of a Europe still resting in its timeless dawn. Walking instead of rushing. Across the wide and quiet stretches of the old continent, long before trains or coaches rattled through the countryside, travel unfolded at the pace of footsteps. Roads wound gently between fields and forests, shaped not by great plans, but by generations of people simply walking where they needed to go. Every foot pressed into the earth left a soft reminder that the land and the traveler shared the same steady rhythm. A merchant moving from one village to another begins his journey with no sense of hurry. His boots are worn but sturdy, softened by many miles. His pack rests easily on his back, carrying only what he needs: cloth, spices, small tools, perhaps a loaf of bread wrapped carefully to keep it from drying. Nothing squeaks, nothing clicks, nothing buzzes. The only sounds are the rustle of his steps and the faint brushing of his pack against his coat. The path ahead is familiar, It curves gently around low hills and follows the edges of fields that change color with each season. Wildflowers lean toward the morning sun as though greeting anyone who passes. Some nod softly in the breeze, which the merchant accepts as a polite hello. He always nods back. It feels only right to acknowledge such loyal roadside company. Beyond the flowers, golden fields stretch outward in long, rolling waves. Grain sways with a calm that matches the traveler's pace. The world feels larger because every distance is experienced slowly, step by step. The merchant is never overwhelmed by it. Instead, the landscape seems to expand around him like an unfolding tapestry, revealing details only a walker would notice. A narrow footbridge covered with dew, a cluster of stones arranged unintentionally into a pleasant pattern, a tree stump shaped suspiciously like an elderly man's profile. In this era, the earth feels alive beneath every mile that is walked. Nothing blurs past, nothing is missed. A gentle slope is felt in the legs, a change of soil noticed beneath the boots, a shift in the air sensed long before the landscape confirms it. Travel becomes a kind of conversation with the land, each step a reply spoken without words. Far to the south, in Italy, a shepherd moves along a hillside path that his ancestors once walked. The route is narrow, pressed between olive trees and low stones. The flock moves with unhurried confidence, their bells chiming softly in uneven rhythm. The shepherd follows with a relaxed ease, occasionally reaching down to adjust a sandal strap or brush a twig from his trousers. The hillside breeze ruffles his cloak, and he accepts this with a quiet, patient grin, as though the wind were an old friend with harmless habits. Sometimes one of the sheep pauses to inspect a particularly fascinating blade of grass, an event that seems to happen often. The shepherd simply waits, leaning on his staff, knowing full well that a sheep in deep contemplation cannot be rushed. Such pauses are small, gentle reminders that even animals follow the natural pace of their own bodies. And in this age when no clock demands precision, these moments are simply part of the day. Further north, in Scandinavia, fishermen make their way down wooden docks built by grandparents and great-grandparents. The wood is smooth from countless footsteps, and the planks creak in a familiar, reassuring way. The fishermen walk with quiet confidence, carrying nets, small tools, and the soft scent of the sea on their coats. Their movements are calm, grounded, and steady. Occasionally, a gull calls overhead, sounding slightly impatient, but the fishermen do not mind. Gulls always sound impatient, even when they are not. They reach their boats without urgency, tying knots with practiced hands, checking oars and lines. The morning air is cool and crisp, stirring the water into gentle ripples that glimmer faintly under the pale light. All of this takes time, not wasted time, but lived time. Time that settles into the bones, reminding each person that good work flows best when it is not hurried. Meanwhile, in Spain, vineyards spread across the landscape like green and winding rivers. Rows of vines follow the earth's natural curves, rising and falling with the gentle slopes. Their branches twist and knot in ways that resemble familiar patterns. The lines on an old palm, the folds in a well-worn coat, the weaving of a basket passed down through a family. Workers walk between these rows at an easy pace, running their hands lightly over leaves, inspecting the growth with calm attention. Some vines seem to lean slightly toward the workers as though eager to share their progress, and while vines are not known for humor, One could imagine them quietly amused by the daily visits, especially when a hat is temporarily forgotten and left resting on a post. Someone always retrieves it later, smiling softly at the idea of a grapevine trying on a hat. Across Europe, in every region and every landscape, people move at the speed of their own bodies. A potter walks from her home to her workshop with a steady rhythm, her apron tied loosely, her footsteps making small prints in the dust. A farmer walks behind a slow-moving cow, guiding it to the pasture. A pair of friends walk to a nearby village, carrying baskets and exchanging remarks about the weather, which somehow provides endless conversation despite being simple and predictable. Travel is not measured in minutes or miles. It is measured in breaths, in steps, in the shift of sunlight across a path. When someone says a place is not far, they mean it in the most grounded sense, reachable by walking at a comfortable pace, reachable without strain, reachable without waking the next morning sore in unexpected places. When someone says a place is a bit further, this usually means the walk may require an extra piece of bread or the company of a friendly dog. Dogs themselves enjoy the unhurried nature of travel in this era. They trot ahead, pause to sniff, then trot back to ensure their companions are coming along. Their tails move in soft, steady patterns, creating a rhythm that fits perfectly with the footsteps behind them. No one urges them to hurry. They set their own pace, which, to be fair, is usually determined by how interesting the nearby scents are. Because everyone moves slowly, nothing ever truly feels late. A merchant arriving in the afternoon instead of the morning simply means the bread he carries will be enjoyed slightly warmer from the day's air. A fisherman reaching the dock after sunrise finds the water just as welcoming. A shepherd whose flock takes an extra moment to investigate a patch of grass simply reaches the next field when the sun is a little higher in the sky. The land itself supports this gentle pacing. The hills do not demand speed. The forests do not expect urgency. The roads, though simple, offer a sense of reassurance. Each path has been walked many times before, and it will wait patiently for the next traveler. Along the roadside, shrubs sway softly. A hare may dash across a path, though even it seems to move with a certain softness, as though respectful of the morning calm. Birds circle overhead, gliding in broad arcs, descending occasionally to inspect crumbs left from a traveler's lunch. Even the breeze seems to travel at the pace of a walker, brushing the air lightly with cool fingers before moving on. Travel in this age is not only a movement across distance, it is also a movement into quietness. The mind settles as the body finds its natural rhythm. Thoughts drift gently, following the sway of branches or the rustle of grain. The journey becomes an extension of the landscape, each step connecting the traveler more deeply to the slow pulse of the world. When the sun moves lower in the sky, paths are bathed in softer light. Shadows lengthen, stretching across the ground in long, muted shapes. Travelers adjust their packs, loosen their scarves, and continue at the same steady pace. Evening approaches without rush, offering its own kind of calm. Eventually, the traveler, whether merchant, shepherd, fisher, or farmer, reaches a destination. It may be a village tucked between hills, a home beside a quiet stream, or a barn a short distance from the forest edge. The arrival feels natural, unforced, as though the day itself guided the steps. In this age, walking is not an inconvenience. It is the quiet thread that holds life together. Each path, Each field, each turn in the road becomes part of the gentle rhythm of the day. Everyone moves at the pace of their own body, and therefore nothing ever feels late. Work done by hand. Across the quiet stretches of early Europe, long before machines filled workshops with constant motion, nearly all work was guided by the steady rhythm of human hands. Tools existed, simple and familiar, shaped by the needs of their time. They clicked softly, scraped gently, tapped in slow beats, not in the loud rush of engines, but in the patient music of manual craft. The world moved at a gentler pace, and the people who worked within it allowed their tools to follow suit. In a small blacksmith's workshop at the edge of a village, the morning begins not with sudden noise, but with the comforting glow of a fire, coaxed awake. The forge warms gradually, its heat spreading outward in slow waves that settle into the wooden walls and earthen floor. The blacksmith stands before it, sturdy and calm, lifting his hammer with the same steady motion he has practiced for years. Each strike meets the metal with a soft, grounded rhythm. Sparks rise briefly, small bursts of light drifting like lazy fireflies before fading into the cool air. The blacksmith does not rush. Rushing would only cause the metal to misbehave, and the blacksmith long ago learned that metal has a personality of its own. Some pieces seem to enjoy being shaped, softening politely with each strike. Others resist a little, making the blacksmith pause and consider his next move. He often talks to the metal under his breath. Not serious words, just the kind of murmured encouragement one gives to a stubborn pet or a loaf of bread that's taking its time. The metal never complains, of course, but humor helps pass the morning. The workshop smells faintly of iron, warm stone, and the wood of the bellows handle. Sunlight filters through a small window, pulling dust into soft, drifting patterns. The air is thick with the gentle heat of the forge, which settles over the room like a blanket laid across tired shoulders. The blacksmith's movements create a slow, comforting rhythm. Lift, strike, breathe, listen, repeat. Each action flows into the next, not by force, but by habit. Across the continent, in a weaving room in Greece, a completely different rhythm unfolds, just as old, just as steady. Here, narrow bands of sunlight fall across a loom that takes up half the room. The walls are whitewashed, their surfaces glowing faintly beneath the morning light. The air smells of wool, soap, and the faintest trace of lavender, drying in the corner. A woman sits at the loom, her posture relaxed, yet attentive. Her hands move with gentle certainty, guiding thread over and under, back and forth. Each motion has its own quiet soundtrack. The soft thump of the shuttle, the low creak of wood, the faint whisper of wool sliding into place. Her feet press the pedals in a rhythm that could lull even the most distracted mind into stillness. She has woven cloth for many years, long enough that her hands seem to know the work before her mind gives instruction. The cloth grows slowly, line by line, forming a pattern that feels both humble and meaningful. Sometimes she hums while she works, but always softly, the way someone hums when their thoughts are drifting peacefully. At moments, a thread needs adjusting, or a knot demands untangling. She resolves these with gentle patience, not frustration. After all, threads can be stubborn too, just like people, and she has learned that humor helps her through even the most tangled mornings. When a thread misbehaves particularly boldly, she gives it a playful tap, as though reminding it that teamwork is essential. In another part of Europe, in the Netherlands, a carpenter stands beside a long workbench made from thick planks of oak. The bench is worn by generations of craftsmen, its surface marked with small grooves and scratches that look almost like a map of every project ever shaped upon it. The carpenter lifts a piece of fresh oak, examining its color, its grain, and the faint scent that rises from it, a scent that feels both grounding and sweet, like the forest in early morning. With slow, careful strokes, he begins smoothing the wood. His plane glides along the grain, peeling away thin curls that fall to the floor in pale spirals. The shavings gather at his feet like soft ribbons of sunlight, making a faint rustling sound when they shift. Sometimes he pauses just to admire a particularly perfect curl, holding it between thumb and finger as though it were a delicate leaf. When he drops it, it lands with a flutter that seems amused by its own lightness. The carpenter's movements are patient and precise. He does not rush his work. He knows that the wood responds to calm hands. When he shapes a corner, he leans in slightly, using both vision and touch to guide him. He often murmurs small notes to himself as though narrating the process in a private language that the wood somehow understands. His tools rest nearby, arranged neatly: chisels, planes, a mallet, a small saw. None are noisy. All are steady companions. Work in these times is quiet, not silent, but filled with gentle, steady sounds. The tap of a hammer, the swish of wool, the glide of a plane, the low hum of effort settling into a room. The people who work do so with a sense of closeness to their craft. Each object they create holds traces of their hands, marks, textures, shapes that reflect the individuality of the maker. A pot is not just a pot, it carries the slight curve added by the potter's wrist. A chair is not just a chair. The carpenter's careful smoothing is visible in every line. A length of cloth carries the weaver's rhythm, visible in subtle variations of thread tension. Across Europe, artisans of all kinds move through their days with these slow rhythms. In a sunny courtyard in Provence, a potter kneads clay with soft, steady pressure. In the cool stone interior of a workshop in Switzerland, a cooper shapes wooden staves for barrels that will hold wine or water for years. In a quiet corner of Scotland, a woman dyes wool with herbs gathered from the hillsides, stirring the pot with a long wooden spoon as colors slowly deepen. Every craft speaks its own language of movement. A basket maker's reeds bend in graceful arcs. A shoemaker's awl pierces leather with a soft, steady beat. A candle maker pours warm wax with the care of someone carrying a sleeping child. Sometimes these workers speak to one another, but often they do not need to. Their work provides its own quiet company. The sounds are enough. The workshop feels full, even when only one person is present. The spaces hum with calm purpose, grounded in habits, refined over years. Work is slow, not in a way that delays progress, but in a way that honors the process. Time is not something to be beaten. It is something to be accompanied. Tools move at the pace of the body, and the body moves at the pace of the mind when at ease. No one demands that a chair be finished by noon. No bell rings to signal urgency. Tasks are completed when they are ready, shaped by patience rather than pressure. Though the work is quiet, small moments of humor slip naturally into the day. A blacksmith's apprentice drops a piece of coal, then pretends he meant to do it as part of a new efficiency technique. A weaver discovers that a cat has decided her basket of wool is the perfect napping spot and gently negotiates a trade, a cozy blanket corner in exchange for access to her supplies. A carpenter finds that a breeze has scattered his wood shavings across the yard and remarks, with a soft smile, that even the wind wants to help decorate. These moments are mild, warm, and woven seamlessly into the atmosphere of the workshop. They bring a small brightness without disturbing the calm. As the day moves forward, light shifts across each workspace. Sunbeams stretch, soften, and eventually retreat, replaced by the golden glow of lamps or candles. The work slows even further, not out of exhaustion, but because the world outside encourages rest. Tools are cleaned and put away. Materials are folded, stacked, or covered. The last curls of wood shavings are swept into a neat pile, though inevitably a few are left behind to wander into corners, small reminders of the craft that filled the room during the day. In this era, work is not simply the means to survive. It is part of the quiet identity of each person, something done with care, attention, and the gentle humor that makes long days feel soft. And so every object, every spoon, every cloth, every hinge, every chair holds the unmistakable fingerprint of its maker. Not bold, not dramatic, just a quiet signature, left by hands that shaped the world, one slow, steady motion at a time. Midday meals and midday rests. Across medieval and early modern Europe, the middle of the day carried a gentle rhythm that everyone respected, not because of any rule, but because the land itself encouraged a pause. As the sun climbed toward its highest point, its warmth spread across fields, rooftops, and unpaved roads, softening the air in a way that urged even the busiest hands to slow. Life in this era moved according to seasons, weather, and the needs of the body. When the light grew bright and the earth warmed beneath it, people naturally stepped back from their tasks, giving themselves a moment of rest. In a small village at the edge of a valley, a pot of stew simmers quietly over a steady flame. The ingredients inside are simple and familiar: root vegetables, a handful of herbs gathered from the garden, and perhaps a small piece of meat if the day has been fortunate. The stew bubbles softly, releasing a warm aroma that fills the cottage. The scent drifts through the air like a comforting hand resting on the shoulder of the home. Outside, a few chickens wander near the door, pausing every now and then to give the pot suspicious glances, as though wondering why they haven't been invited. Inside, the kitchen remains cool despite the heat outside. Thick walls of stone and small windows keep the room shaded. The light that filters in is gentle, scattered by wooden shutters that have been opened just wide enough to invite a breeze. A wooden bench stands near the table, worn smooth by years of midday gatherings. When the stew is ready, it is lifted from the fire and placed at the center of the room, the pot giving off soft curls of steam that rise slowly before dissolving. Bread is brought out next, slightly firm on the crust, soft on the inside. It is torn rather than sliced, each piece pulled apart by hand with a quiet stretch of fibers. There is something soothing in this simple gesture, as though the bread itself prefers to be shared this way. When a piece comes apart with a particularly satisfying tear, someone around the table may smile without saying anything, as though acknowledging that even bread can have a good day. Water is brought from the well in a wooden bucket, still cool from the depth of the earth. It is poured into clay cups that have been used by the same family for years. The water is clear, refreshing, and tastes faintly of the stone it passed through, something that feels grounding rather than strange. In this time before metal pipes and running taps, water is not taken for granted. Every drop carried into the home feels quietly meaningful, a part of the day's effort woven naturally into the household's rhythm. Meals begin without ceremony. Families sit on wooden benches that creak gently beneath them, the wood settling the way old wood does. Voices remain soft, each sentence spoken in warm tones that drift comfortably around the room. Conversations are not hurried. They are as unstructured as the day itself, meandering like a stream following natural curves. Someone might comment on the weather. Someone else may mention a sheep, with an unusual sense of independence. These small stories flow easily, woven into the quiet hum of the meal. In towns, midday brings its own peacefulness. Market stalls, lively in the early hours, begin to close their shutters for a short while. Merchants cover their goods with cloths to keep them cool, tying knots with practiced hands. The square grows quieter as footsteps fade. The sound of conversation softens, replaced by the gentle rustle of fabric and the low clatter of tools being set aside. Somewhere nearby, a cart horse exhales slowly, grateful for a bit of shade and the chance to enjoy a break as much as any human. Even the animals seem to understand the lull. Dogs stretch themselves beneath wagons or against cool stone walls, their tails thumping lazily before they settle down. A cat claims the sunniest spot available, even if that spot happens to be the middle of a basket, inconveniently placed for everyone else. Chickens, normally full of determined purpose, stroll instead of march, occasionally sitting down to consider life with a contemplative tilt of the head. A cow resting under a tree might flick its tail gently, not with annoyance, but with slow appreciation of the shade. In the countryside, workers in the fields step away from their tools. Scythes are laid carefully on the ground. Rakes rest against fence posts. A cloth is spread beneath a tree, or a wooden stool is pulled into the shade of a barn. The air grows thick with the warmth of the midday sun, but the shade remains cool and inviting. The shift from work to rest happens in a natural, unspoken way. No one announces it, no bell rings. The sun simply reaches a certain height and life follows. Meals in these places are just as humble as those in the villages. A wooden bowl of stew, a slice of bread, a wedge of cheese, a handful of berries. Whatever is available becomes the midday meal. Workers eat slowly, savoring the taste with the ease of people who understand the value of these quiet moments. Sometimes someone brings out a small jar of honey, sharing it with a discreet smile, as though offering a rare treasure. It is not an extravagant gift, but in this world, sweetness is a delight, best enjoyed with others. In coastal regions, fishermen take their midday rest near the shore. Nets are piled in gentle heaps, their fibers drying in the sun. Boats rock softly at the edge of the water, bumping against wooden posts with quiet, rhythmic thuds. The sea breeze drifts in, carrying the scent of salt and kelp. A simple meal is shared. Bread, olives, perhaps dried fish. Someone might point out a gull that seems particularly invested in their lunch. And the group responds with the calm amusement of men who are used to being observed by hungry birds. Humor finds its way naturally into these restful periods, not loud jokes or bursts of laughter, but soft, subtle remarks that stir a smile. A worker may claim that his tools become heavier after midday, insisting they mysteriously absorb sunlight. Another might explain how a chicken followed him all morning, clearly believing itself to be an apprentice. No one corrects him. In truth, the chicken probably believed that the man dropped crumbs generously, but the story is better the way it is. When the meal ends, the world seems to fall into an even deeper stillness for a moment. People lean back against trees, walls, or the side of a wagon. Some close their eyes. Others simply gaze into the distance, letting their thoughts drift like clouds moving across the sky. There is no expectation to be productive. The land itself encourages rest. Even birds lower their activity, hopping quietly through patches of shade and occasionally ruffling their feathers in slow, contented motions. In the cool interiors of cottages and farmhouses, families rest as well. Benches become comfortable seats for leaning. Soft cloths are placed beneath tired heads. A breeze may slip through a window, carrying the faint scent of herbs from a garden outside. It curls around the room like a gentle visitor, welcome but not demanding attention. Children take short naps, their breathing light and even. Adults close their eyes, though they seldom sleep fully. Instead, they settle into a peaceful stillness that refreshes without effort. Shops in towns remain closed. Roads are quiet. Only the distant sound of a wooden wheel turning or a goat bleating softly breaks the silence. And even those sounds feel muted, wrapped in the warmth of the midday air. Eventually, slowly, naturally, the rest comes to an end. The sun begins to shift downward, its heat softening, its brightness mellowing. People stretch with quiet, contented movements. Tools are retrieved. Market stalls reopen. The world returns to motion, but it does so gently, without rushing. In this age, midday holds a special place. Not because anyone declares it so, but because nature encourages a pause and life responds with quiet acceptance. The world takes a breath. People take a breath. Even the animals take a breath. And in this shared stillness, the day finds its balance. A soft place between labor and rest, between morning effort and evening calm, where time unfolds in its most tranquil shape. Afternoons measured by shadows. In the long, unhurried afternoons of early Europe, time spreads like warm light across the land, unconcerned with minutes or mechanical tickings, guided instead by the soft, predictable drifting of shadows that lengthen slowly as the sun descends. Before clocks became common companions in homes and workshops, the world answered gently to these moving shapes, allowing them to signal beginnings, pauses, and endings in a steady language, understood by everyone without a word being spoken. Children, accustomed to playing in the open spaces of fields, lanes, and village yards, often learn the art of reading shadows long before they fully grasp numbers. They know when to return home because their own silhouettes have stretched just far enough across the ground to resemble friendly giants, tall and clear against the earth. And this moment becomes a natural cue to wander back with whatever treasures they may have collected. Stones that look interesting, sticks that pretend to be swords, or a stubborn beetle they spent the afternoon negotiating with, who naturally insisted on going its own way. Farmers, working slowly under the gentle sun, rely on the shape cast by the barn to understand when the plowing of the day should come to an end, when its shadow reaches a familiar stone or touches the edge of a wooden post. The farmers know the time has arrived to lead their animals back, unhitch the equipment, and finish their tasks with a sense of completion that feels neither forced nor rushed. Sometimes a barn's shadow grows at such a leisurely pace that a farmer may briefly wonder if the sun has decided to take a restful pause too, though this thought passes with the same quiet humor that fills the air during long afternoons on the land. Markets in towns and villages follow this natural rhythm as well. The sun reaches a particular wall, or the shade touches the first row of stalls, and merchants begin the calm process of closing for the day. Wooden shutters are pulled down, goods are wrapped carefully in cloth, and baskets are stacked one on top of another with a precision born from repetition rather than pressure. There are no hurried shouts, no frantic rush to beat a clock. Even the most spirited merchant seems softened by the afternoon's warmth, moving with steps tuned to the slow summer air. A stray dog may wander through the market, sniffing thoughtfully at empty corners, perhaps hoping someone forgot a crumb, and often receiving a small morsel from a kindly hand that cannot resist offering a treat to such a hopeful face. The afternoon carries a stillness that modern life rarely allows. In Provence, bees drift over lavender fields in a slow, contented dance, their gentle buzzing blending into the warm fragrance that settles over the land like a soft ribbon. They move from flower to flower with an ease that suggests they have all the time in the world, because in truth, the afternoon seems to promise exactly that. A breeze occasionally stirs the lavender, sending its scent deeper into the air, and the bees adjust their paths with casual grace, entirely unbothered by such small changes in their flight route. High in the Alps, goats wander toward higher pastures with the same relaxed certainty. Their bells ring in soft, irregular melodies as they move, creating a peaceful soundscape that drifts across rocky slopes and patches of wild grass. A herder follows them with the calm patience learned from both the mountains and the goats themselves. Occasionally, a goat pauses to consider a tuft of grass or a rock that appears to offer profound significance, and the herder simply waits, knowing that a goat contemplating a rock is participating in its own version of afternoon philosophy. No one hurries a goat, not because they cannot be hurried, but because rushing would interrupt the simple harmony of the day. On the Scottish coast, fishermen mend their nets in a rhythm that aligns with the tide's gentle knock against the shore. Their fingers move slowly through the ropes, weaving, tightening, examining each section with the calm focus of those who have done this work their entire lives. The nets sway slightly in the wind, occasionally brushing against a fisherman's knee or cheek, as though offering its own quiet suggestion for repair. In the distance, seagulls glide across the water, their wings catching the soft afternoon light. Some land near the fishermen, eyeing them with the hopeful curiosity of birds, used to sharing the landscape with humans. The fisherman may toss a small scrap to them, not out of necessity, but because such gestures make the afternoon feel complete. In small villages, the pace is even slower. A cat may stretch itself across a low wall, blinking lazily at anyone who walks past, as though granting them permission to continue their day. A group of older villagers sit outside their homes, mending baskets or sorting seeds, sharing quiet remarks between long pauses that feel comfortable rather than empty. Nearby, laundry flutters lightly on a line, drying in the soft warmth. A child may run past chasing a butterfly, though chasing, in this context, is closer to walking quickly with enthusiasm, because even children, naturally energetic as they are, seem to soften their pace under the afternoon sun. Shadows become the true guides of the day. They shift across the ground in slow, predictable patterns. A tree's shadow stretches gently toward a well, marking the slow passing of time. A cottage casts a shape onto a path, informing neighbors of how long they have until evening chores begin. The shadow of a water bucket leans further across the ground as the sun dips, offering a silent kind of companionship. Even animals follow these cues. Chickens instinctively move into the shade as the heat deepens. Cows pause their grazing as the barn shadow lengthens, and horses lower their heads, resting beneath trees whose leaves rustle faintly in tiny breezes. Nothing requires precision in these afternoons. Everything requires presence. A blacksmith finishes his morning work and steps outside to stand in the sunlight for a moment, letting the heat rest on his shoulders. A woman weaving at her loom shifts her chair slightly so the sun does not fall directly onto her eyes, continuing her motions with the same gentle rhythm. A group of children walking along a dusty path stops to draw figures in the dirt with sticks, completely unbothered by how long it takes. The world encourages them to linger. In the countryside, the air grows warmer, but even the warmth feels softened by the slow pace of the day. Birds perch on fence posts, preening their feathers with unhurried care. A breeze picks up and then fades, leaving behind a stillness filled only with tiny sounds. The murmur of insects, the distant clop of a horse's hoof, the faint creak of wooden wheels as someone finishes a task. Afternoon is a time for motion, yes, but motion without urgency. It is the hour when the land seems to exhale. A potter steps out of her workshop and wipes her hands on her apron, watching the shadows slide across the yard. She judges how much time remains before she must cover her clay pieces, not by any tool, but by the soft line of shade reaching toward the wooden bench. A farmer leaning against a fence checks the height of the sun, nodding to himself when he sees it nearing the familiar angle that means it's time to gather his tools. Even a dog lying in the sun shifts its position when the shadow reaches just the right spot, moving a few inches to maintain its warm patch, and occasionally giving a dramatic sigh for emphasis, as though this tiny adjustment were a considerable feat. As the afternoon deepens, the light becomes warmer. Dust motes drift in the air like tiny golden specks. A cart rolls slowly down the road, its wheels producing a rhythmic, gentle thump over stones. The driver sits comfortably, reins loose in his hands, letting the horse choose its own pace because the horse, too, understands the tone of the afternoon. Everything moves, but nothing pushes. Everything changes, but nothing hurries. The shadows measure time with a softness that honors both the land and the people who move upon it. In this era, afternoons are not scheduled, they unfold. They drift from moment to moment, much like the shadows themselves, quiet, reliable, and shaped entirely by light. And in this drifting, life finds a calm that wraps gently around the day, inviting everyone to slow, breathe, and simply be part of the world as it settles under the warm, unbroken sky. Evening. Fire, story, and soft light. When the sun begins its slow descent behind the hills and rooftops of early Europe, the continent shifts gently from the warm brightness of the afternoon into the tender glow of evening, becoming a peaceful collection of small flames scattered across the land. Candles flicker inside cottages, their soft light stretching across wooden tables and rough stone walls, creating gentle patterns that sway with every small movement of air. Hearths burn with steady embers that have been carried through countless nights, their warmth wrapping around the home like a quiet embrace. Lanterns sway lightly in barns, their flames dancing in small arcs each time a draft slips through the open doorway, casting moving shadows on beams and hay as though the evening itself is finding its rhythm. Evening in this time is not a moment for loud celebration or quick entertainment. It is a time for gathering, for settling, for letting the day fold into itself with calm acceptance. Families sit close not only because affection binds them, but because the light is limited and warmth shared among bodies and fire is both practical and comforting. The closeness creates a sense of gentle togetherness that feels natural, like the way birds draw nearer on a branch when the air grows cooler. Cushions are placed on benches, stools are pulled near the hearth, and everyone finds a comfortable place within the circle of light. Someone begins a story, not dramatic or exaggerated, but familiar, steady, and easy on the mind. It might be about a relative who once tried to grow a pumpkin larger than the neighbor's, but accidentally fed the local goat instead, resulting in a pumpkin of respectable size and a goat of distinctly suspicious enthusiasm. Or it might be about a season when the rains arrived earlier than expected and everyone had to dry herbs by hanging them in every possible corner of the cottage, turning the entire home into something resembling a very fragrant forest. These stories are shared not for excitement, but for comfort, for the warmth that rises when memory passes quietly between people. Children play with carved wooden toys, animals shaped from small blocks of timber, carts with round wheels that wobble charmingly as though committed to living life at their own pace, and dolls with simple painted faces that always seem slightly amused by the world around them. The soft tapping of toys against the floor blends seamlessly with the crackling of the fire. Occasionally, a child tries to make a wooden animal stand perfectly upright, only to watch it lean and lie down politely, as if observing its bedtime ahead of schedule. Adults mend clothes with slow, practiced movements. Needles move through fabric with a gentle rhythm, thread sliding smoothly as tiny repairs are made to hems, sleeves, and worn patches. A lantern flickers beside the sewing, illuminating the hands that perform this work with the quiet confidence earned by repetition. The soft rasp of thread being pulled, the occasional snip of scissors, and the muted rustle of cloth become part of the evening's soundtrack. Someone might comment lightly on how a certain shirt always finds a way to tear in the same spot, almost as if it has developed a personality of its own, preferring that particular corner to breathe freely. A pot rests on the fire, heating water for washing. The steam rises gently, twirling upward like a thin thread of warm cloud. The scent of heated water, wood, and a few herbs tossed in for fragrance drifts lightly around the room. Someone lifts the pot carefully with thick cloths wrapped around their hands, pouring it into a basin and mixing in cooler water until it reaches the perfect warmth. The steam curls into the air, fogging a small patch of the window before fading. Washing at day's end becomes a slow ritual, one that soothes muscles tired from fields, workshops, and chores, replacing the dust of the day with comfort. Outside, the world turns darker, but the darkness is not heavy or frightening. It is a soft blanket drawn across the landscape, calming the rustle of leaves and settling the fields into a muted stillness. Paths grow faint beneath the dim sky, but everyone knows them by memory. The sounds of the village become gentler, the distant closing of a door, the creak of a wooden gate settling into place, a cow shifting in the barn with a low and sleepy sigh. Even the chickens quiet down, hopping onto their roosts and tucking their heads beneath their wings, as though agreeing to the night's invitation to rest. In some households, someone gently opens a window to let the cool air flow inside for a moment. The wind carries with it the scent of grass, the faint sweetness of fruit stored for the winter, and the earthy aroma of the slowly cooling land. A candle flickers in response, making small shadows dance across the room before settling again into their natural stillness. Lamps and candles burn low, their flames adjusting naturally to the room's quiet chatter. In a cottage in the Alps, the evening warmth becomes particularly cherished as the air cools quickly once the sun sets behind the mountains. Families huddle a little closer, sharing blankets made of thick wool, their edges worn smooth by many nights of use. A child might rest their head on a parent's shoulder, drifting towards sleep, even as the last bits of conversation float around them. A large pot sits near the hearth, holding water that will be used early the next morning, warming slowly so the early rising is easier. In coastal villages, evening brings the sound of the tide, soft and rhythmic. Fishermen sketch the outline of tomorrow's plan, whether to mend a second net in the morning or adjust a boat's rope before the next voyage. They speak in quiet voices, occasionally pausing to sip warm tea. The lantern swinging in the corner of the room casts moving shadows that gently imitate waves on a wall. A cat curls at the foot of the table, sleepy and convinced that fishermen tell the best stories, as long as they occasionally drop a crumb. In Provence, the scent of lavender still lingers in the air, drifting into open windows along with the remains of afternoon warmth. A woman sets a small wooden box of herbs near the window, allowing their fragrance to fill the room as the breeze passes through. A man places another log onto the hearth with careful movements, stepping back as sparks glow briefly, rising and falling like tiny golden insects settling into the air before disappearing. If a spark leaps too boldly, someone often murmurs a gentle comment, as though chastising a playful child. Evening creates a world where everything slows, tools are put away, animals grow still, meals are finished, the fields outside lie quiet, and the trees sway in low, unhurried motions. Lanterns glow in barns, illuminating stacks of hay that look almost golden under the warm light. Horses blink slowly, their heads dipping in a peaceful rhythm. Occasionally, one releases a sigh so deep and expressive that anyone hearing it may feel inclined to sigh too, simply out of solidarity. Inside the cottage, stories continue with soft voices. Someone recalls a journey taken years ago, stopping halfway to describe the stubborn mule that insisted on taking breaks exactly when the travelers did not need them. Another person remembers the time a particularly determined goose followed the family for half a mile, possibly believing it had been adopted. The laughter is not loud. It is quiet, warm, and woven into the fabric of the evening, like a thread of silver worked into cloth. Eventually the stories slow, not because anyone runs out of things to share, but because the night deepens, encouraging rest. Candles burn lower and the shadows lengthen across the walls. The flames shimmer in smaller arcs as wax melts into the base. Someone stands to adjust the fire, nudging a log gently with a poker and coaxing a few bright embers into life before letting the flames settle again. Outside, the darkness rests softly across the land, and the stars begin to rise. They scatter across the sky with quiet confidence, shimmering just enough to remind anyone who glances upward that the world is wide, calm, and content in its stillness. A breeze settles into the village, carrying the faint rustle of leaves and the distant whisper of the nighttime earth cooling beneath the sky. Inside the cottage, with firelight fading and voices softening, evening closes like a gentle hand folding a page. The day ends not with urgency, but with peaceful presence. The last candle flickers, the last pot is set aside, and the last story settles in the air like a warm memory ready to drift into sleep. Nights without electricity. When night settles across early Europe, it does so completely, covering the landscape in a darkness that feels soft rather than severe, a kind of natural curtain drawn gently over the world to signal rest. Without the glow of streetlights or the hum of electric lamps, the land falls into a deep, unbroken shade that wraps around cottages, fields, and forests, like a thick woolen cloak laid carefully across tired shoulders. This darkness is not something to resist. It is something to welcome, because within it lies a calm that the people of this time have known for generations. Above the rooftops, the stars shine with a clarity that feels almost intentional, as though the sky has been patiently waiting all day for its chance to show who it really is. The Milky Way stretches across the heavens in a bright, shimmering band, not as a concept or a picture in a book, but as a familiar companion, appearing every evening like a quiet friend who keeps their distance but never fails to arrive. On clear nights, the stars scatter themselves in patterns that look almost playful, and some villagers insist that a few of the brighter stars twinkle as though they are laughing softly at the secrets of the world below. From the edges of forests, owls call into the darkness, their steady voices moving across the fields like low, thoughtful notes in a song that drifts without hurry. The sound is neither eerie nor startling. It is part of the night's natural rhythm, a reminder that the forest remains awake even as the village settles. Occasionally, a second owl responds, and their calls travel back and forth in a slow, unhurried conversation, perhaps about hunting or perhaps simply about the quality of the moonlight. Owls, after all, seem to have opinions on such things. The wind weaves itself through thatched roofs and wooden eaves, slipping between the small openings with the quiet confidence of someone who knows they are welcome. It rustles gently through the straw, creating a soft, whispering sound that feels almost like the house settling into sleep. In cottages built of stone, The wind moves differently, brushing along the outer walls and humming softly at the corners before sighing itself into stillness. Every home has its own way of speaking to the night. And the night, content, listens. Dogs curl beside doors or beneath wooden tables, letting out long, slow breaths that rise and fall in steady rhythms. Their ears twitch occasionally at distant sounds, the hoot of an owl, the shifting of a cow in the barn, the faint creak of a gate adjusting to the night air. But none of these sounds call them to action. This is not the hour for barking or patrolling. It is the hour for companionship and rest. Sometimes a dog will sigh so dramatically that the entire household glances over with amusement, silently acknowledging that even dogs appreciate the calming weight of darkness. Inside cottages, the glow of the hearth dims as embers settle into their resting place. Families begin to prepare for bed in slow, familiar motions. Wool blankets are shaken gently to release the cool air trapped within them, then laid across straw mattresses that rustle softly when touched. These blankets are thick, often woven by hands within the same household, and heavy enough to ease the body into stillness. When someone lifts a corner of the blanket and lets it fall, the sound resembles a quiet exhale, as though the blanket itself is relieved to be of service. The home cools gradually as the night deepens, each room settling into temperatures shaped by stone, wood, and the gentle fading of firelight. In winter, breath becomes visible in the air for a brief moment before disappearing, curling upward like tiny clouds that lift toward the ceiling beams. Children often find this amusing and try to puff little clouds into the dark, an innocent nightly ritual made more delightful by the soft giggles that follow. The adults smile, letting the moment pass naturally before guiding everyone toward sleep. Before lying down, someone may walk through the house to check the doors, sliding wooden bars into place with slow, steady movements. Another family member sets aside tools used throughout the day, placing them in familiar spots where they will easily be found in the morning. Shoes are lined up near the door, coats hung on wooden pegs, and clay pots shifted slightly closer to the wall to stay safe through the night. These motions are small, but they complete the quiet transition from day to night, allowing the home to settle fully. Once everyone slips beneath their blankets, the darkness becomes even more comforting. There are no flashing lights, no mechanical noises, no glow from screens or lamps. The only illumination comes from the faintest remnants of the embers or occasionally from moonlight filtering through a small window, casting a gentle silver line across the floor. The shadows move softly as the wind shifts the branches outside. Everything feels slower, grounded, and connected. Sleep in this era does not arrive out of exhaustion alone. It arrives from rhythm, a rhythm created by days filled with steady work, meals shared at calm tables, and evenings spent in warm, dim rooms. The world quiets itself naturally, and the body follows. A person lying on a straw mattress can feel the gentle give of the material beneath them, hear the soft rustling as they adjust, and sense how each layer, blanket, straw, wood, supports rest with a kind of simple integrity that comes only from natural materials shaped by hand. In many cottages, someone keeps a small candle near the bed, though it is rarely lit at night. Most families prefer the darkness, finding comfort in how complete it is. The darkness holds no sharp edges, only soft outlines. It wraps around the home with steady patience, carrying with it the calm assurance that the village, the land, and the sky have all embraced the same gentle pause. Outside, the village grows silent. Paths that were busy with footsteps during the day now rest beneath the stars. Barns hold their animals in quiet stillness. Wells sit untouched, their ropes hanging loosely. The wind moves through the tops of trees with the softest rustle, creating a sound that resembles the turning of pages in a very old book. Occasionally, a fox may pass through the outskirts of the village, its footsteps nearly silent, pausing only long enough to breathe in the cool air before continuing on its way. In some places, a lone rooster may give a confused half-crow, unsure whether the moon is bright enough to signal dawn. Villagers, accustomed to these premature announcements, simply smile in the dark, knowing the rooster will correct himself soon enough. Animals, like people, sometimes misread the shadows, and this is accepted as part of the night's gentle personality. As the hours deepen, sleep settles fully across the homes. Breathing becomes slow and even. The darkness thickens in a way that feels soothing rather than oppressive. Midnight passes without any fanfare, acknowledged only by the quiet shifting of someone adjusting their blanket or the faint pop of a cooling log in the hearth. The sky, vast and calm, continues its slow arc overhead. The stars drift slightly, tracing paths that humans have admired for centuries. Even those who are already asleep feel the quiet order of the universe around them, though not consciously. It settles in the bones, in the stillness of the mind, in the gentle weight of the wool blankets. Night does not rush. It lingers. It rests. It restores. And when the first pale hints of dawn begin to touch the edges of the horizon, they do so with the same softness that the night carried, the same quiet promise of rhythm returning, of life waking gradually, of another day beginning without hurry. Sleep comes in this world not from weariness, but from alignment with the land, with the hour, with the stillness that gathers naturally when darkness falls fully and the world agrees to rest together under the vast, star-filled sky. The Four Gentle Seasons. Across the old continent, the passing of seasons shapes life more softly than any rule or schedule, guiding the world with a quiet certainty that everyone instinctively understands, from farmers in the valleys to shepherds on the hills, and even to the chickens who pretend not to care, but always adjust their routines in amusingly perfect synchrony. Spring begins with soft rain that falls in patient rhythms over fields and rooftops, tapping lightly on wooden shutters and creating small puddles along village paths that children somehow manage to step in, no matter how carefully they try to avoid them. The earth turns muddy and rich, holding the prints of boots, paws, and sometimes even the curious imprint of a goat who insists that puddles are meant to be inspected. Lambs dot the grass in gentle clusters, their soft bleats rolling through the air like little threads of sound woven into the morning breeze. Trees stretch themselves awake, shaking off winter with sprouting leaves that unfurl as if shyly greeting the sun. The air smells of damp soil and new beginnings, and the villagers welcome the season in the calm, steady manner they welcome everything, by continuing their daily chores with renewed softness letting the warmth settle gradually into their bones. As spring drifts toward summer, the days lengthen in a leisurely fashion, stretching across fields and forests until evening light seems almost reluctant to leave. Windows are opened wide to invite in fresh air, letting the scents of herbs, fresh grass, and sun-warmed wood drift through homes. Bread rises quickly in the warm air, its dough softening with enthusiasm that feels almost humorous, as though the bread itself is delighted by the longer daylight. Bees wander lazily through open doorways before realizing they may have gone too far and making a gentle exit, leaving behind a faint buzz of apology. Laundry dries in wide arcs of sunlight, flapping contentedly in the breeze. Villagers move slower in the heat, pausing more often in the shade of trees, where conversations happen in unhurried murmurs. Children run barefoot over warm ground, and even the elders sit outside to mend baskets or shell peas, feeling the warmth settle comfortably across their shoulders. Summer does not arrive with force. It glides into the land like a warm, familiar guest who knows exactly how softly to close the door. Autumn approaches with a palette of colors that spreads quietly across hillsides and forests. Leaves shift from green to warm gold, amber, and soft red, falling one by one in an unhurried cascade that decorates the ground naturally. Harvest scents drift steadily through villages, apples drying on wooden racks, herbs tied in bundles hanging from beams, and freshly turned earth echoing the season's steady rhythm. Wood is stacked neatly for winter, each log placed with care, and the occasional gentle remark about which pieces determine to roll away, no matter how flat the ground appears. Markets fill with baskets of late fruit, root vegetables, and jars of preserves carefully prepared during long afternoons. The air grows cooler, and evenings become crisp enough that villagers pull shawls or wool cloaks more tightly around themselves. The sun dips earlier behind the trees, encouraging families to gather indoors sooner, though not unhappily. The shift is familiar, welcomed like an old tradition that circles back each year with comforting predictability. Winter settles gently over the land, bringing deep silence that muffles even the smallest sounds. Snow rests on timber frames, covering rooftops and fences in soft white layers that sparkle faintly under moonlight. The days grow short, and the evenings stretch long, but there is a certain warmth in the way communities adjust to the slow, protective rhythm of the season. Homes glow with the steady burn of hearth fires, their flames flickering in warm hues that soothe the cool air. Villagers wear layers of wool that creak softly when they move, creating a quiet symphony of fabric and warmth. Footsteps in the snow produce gentle crunches, each step leaving a clear imprint that looks beautifully precise in the early morning light. Nights feel endless, but not in an uncomfortable way. Instead, they wrap around households with the steady reassurance of a heavy blanket, encouraging rest and stillness. Children press their hands to frosted windows to draw shapes in the thin layer of ice, their laughter hushed by the cozy quiet of winter evenings. Even animals fall into deeper rhythms. Cows rest longer in the barn, dogs curl closer to doors, and cats stretch luxuriously near the warmest patch of floor, claiming it with an authority that no one dares challenge. Throughout all 4 seasons, life continues not with interruptions, but with adaptation, each change in the weather guiding the flow of daily tasks in a way that feels both natural and grounding. People rise with the light available to them, whether the pale brightness of winter or the generous glow of summer. Meals shift with the harvests, flavors changing with herbs, fruits, and vegetables that appear and disappear as the months turn. Work adjusts its pace to temperature and daylight, becoming slow and steady in the heat, brisk and purposeful in the cold, always shaped by the land and the sky. Seasons do not interrupt life in this world. They shape it gently, folding themselves into each moment with the quiet authority of something ancient and constant. Villagers learn their rhythms not through calendars or clocks, but through the sensations that pass through their hands, their breath, and their surroundings. The weight of a wool cloak, the smell of fruit drying in the sun, the crisp sound of snow underfoot, the warm scent of bread rising. Every season carries its own softness, its own humor, its own presence. Together they form the natural breath of the year, guiding early Europe with calm, steady patience. The unhurried mind. Before constant messages, before the flicker of notifications or the hurried rhythm of modern noise, the pace of thought in early Europe moved gently, matching the world that shaped it. Minds drifted the way clouds did, slowly across familiar skies, taking their time to settle, to wander, to turn ideas over like smooth stones warmed by the sun. Reflection was not a luxury reserved for rare moments. It was woven naturally into the day, inevitable as morning light or the sound of footsteps on a dirt path. People found their thoughts rising softly during the simplest tasks, walking along quiet roads worn by generations, tending animals with steady hands, or mending clothes beside a low-burning hearth, where the warmth made even complicated thoughts seem more patient. A shepherd guiding his flock across a hillside had all the time in the world to consider whether the sheep truly understood directions or were simply pretending to, as sheep often appeared to do. A potter might pause while smoothing the rim of a clay bowl, letting their mind drift toward memories of seasons past, perhaps remembering a pot that leaned slightly to the side but was kept anyway because it had character. A word many early pots earned with great enthusiasm. A woman spinning wool might allow her thoughts to wander as the wheel turned in soft circles, the rhythm of the motion helping ideas settle into place like wool winding neatly around a spindle. Life was simple, but simplicity did not mean ease. Work required effort, days were long, and the land offered its own quiet challenges. Yet this simplicity created breathing space between each moment, allowing the mind to stretch out comfortably instead of tightening under pressure. Thoughts grew at their own pace, emerging gradually like seedlings pushing through spring soil, never rushed, never forced. Even small pauses, such as stopping to adjust a bootstrap or watching a leaf drift across a stream, opened small windows for reflection, creating little pockets of calm that stitched the hours together. In villages, the rhythm of the day encouraged this gentle mental drifting. Someone carrying a bucket of water from the well had time to consider the slightly crooked shape of the bucket's handle and whether it had always been that way or had quietly developed its own artistic tilt. A farmer sowing seeds in careful rows found space to think with each step, his mind moving as quietly as his feet over the earth. A fisherman mending nets by the shore often found himself reflecting not only on the nets but on the way the waves rolled in at such a dependable pace, as if the sea itself wanted to remind everyone that steady repetition had its own kind of wisdom. Children, too, experienced this unhurried mental world. though they expressed it differently. Lying in the grass and watching clouds drift across the sky, they would imagine shapes, appearing and disappearing, letting their thoughts flow as freely as the clouds. Their play was slow and thoughtful, built around small discoveries: an unusually round stone, a patch of moss that felt softer than expected, or a stick that seemed perfect for drawing in the dirt. Each discovery led to a moment of quiet contemplation disguised as play. The evenings, with their soft firelight and murmurs of familiar stories, invited minds to settle even further. While adults mended clothes or prepared simple meals, thoughts drifted between memory and anticipation, shaping soft reflections without urgency. The crackle of the hearth encouraged a kind of mental untying, allowing people to release the small knots of the day and let their minds wander into calm simplicity. Sometimes a humorous memory slipped into the conversation, causing a quiet chuckle, never loud, never disruptive, just enough to warm the moment like an ember, flaring briefly. Even in winter, when days were shorter and tasks required more planning, the mind found places to rest. The slow boiling of water, the gentle stacking of firewood, the quiet sweep of snow from a doorstep, all became moments where the mind drifted alongside the hands. The cold air sharpened the senses but softened the thoughts, guiding them inward to a warm center where reflection settled like a blanket. A person sitting by the window, watching snow fall in steady patterns, often found their thoughts moving with the flakes, unhurried and easy. This unhurried mind shaped a way of living that felt grounded and calm even when work was demanding. People understood that reflection was part of the day just as much as motion. They accepted that tasks took time, thoughts took time, and seasons took time. Nothing insisted on immediate answers. Ideas matured slowly, shaped by quiet moments, small observations, and the steady rhythm of natural life. A simple life was not always easy, but it offered something gentle. Space between moments, room for thoughts to wander, and a relationship with time that felt soft around the edges. In this world, the mind moved like the footsteps that carried people through their days, steady, grounded, unhurried, and deeply at home in the quiet simplicity of the land. Part 12. A soft return. As the old continent settles into night once more, the land folds itself gently into a familiar calm, letting windows dim until only the faintest glow remains behind wooden shutters. Fires fade into low, steady embers that crackle softly, as though whispering their final thoughts for the day. And the cool air drifts through courtyards and narrow lanes with the quiet confidence of something that knows exactly where it belongs. The world slips back into the ancient rhythm it knew before modern noise, a rhythm shaped by tools laid aside, footsteps slowing on worn paths, and the soft hush that settles over fields, forests, and rooftops. As you breathe slowly, you feel the calm of a Europe guided by steady hands, by seasons turning with patient grace, and by the small daily rituals that have grounded countless lives. Bread cooling on a table, a cloak hung neatly by the door, a cat deciding the warmest spot near the hearth is officially its new kingdom. It is a life without rush, a life without machines, a life measured only by light drifting through windows, by steps taken at an easy pace, by stories shared in low voices, and by the gentle rest that arrives when the day has been touched by honest work. Let the simplicity of that world stay with you now, settling over you like a woolen blanket and guiding you softly toward sleep, the way the night once guided whole villages into the quiet safety of their dreams.